Hey everybody, today we're going to be looking at the corner to corner join as you go crochet technique. Okay, so you can see this is where we ended our last square. We're going to turn our work so that string is coming off of the left side, and then we are going to begin our work in the right corner. So we are going to attach our new color, and then we're going to chain up 6. Now that we have our 6 chains, we are going to skip the first 3 and then work 1 double crochet into the last 3 chains. Alright, now you can see we have our little 3 double crochet cluster. We are going to attach it like this, and as you can see, when you do this technique, you're going to want the double crochets to be going like opposite directions. So when you're attaching the yarn, you don't want the yarn to be going in the same direction. So this cluster is going side to side and the cluster below it is going up and down. So we're just going to slip stitch into the space in between those first 2 clusters from the last color, chain 3, and then slip stitch into that next space. We are going to turn our work, chain up 3, and then work 3 double crochets into that chain space. Now we are going to slip stitch into that chain space from that cluster, chain up 3, and then place 3 double crochets into that chain space. Turn your work, chain up 6, and then do the cluster again. So skip those 3 first chains and then work 1 single crochet in the last 3 chains. Slip stitch into that next chain space to attach the cluster you just made, chain up 3, place 3 double crochets into that chain space. And then you do the same thing, so you're going to want to slip stitch into that next chain space, and now we are on the cluster that connects to the previous square. So it's the same thing, place the 3 double crochets in the chain space, then you are going to slip stitch your square to attach it to the square below it. So go into that space and work a slip stitch, chain 3, and then slip stitch into that next space to attach the chain 3. Then you're going to turn your work again, chain up 3, and then work your 3 double crochet cluster. And that is basically it. The only part that is different really is when you're at the side where you're attaching it to the previous square. So you just want to make sure that you slip stitch into that space below it to attach that square, chain 3, and then you're making the chain space that you're going to turn your work and then work into and go back up. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so I am to the point where I am attaching to the end of the square below. So it's just the same thing, you did your chain 3 and then slip stitch into the end corner, and then you're going to work the same thing. So you're going to chain up 3 and then do your cluster and work back up the rest of the square. Since we are doing 6 by 6 corner to corner crochet squares. This is going to be our last cluster on top, and then now we are going to start decreasing to get to the other corner of the square. So just count, make sure you have 6 and 6 to make sure everything's even. You're going to chain 1, and then I slip stitch into the top of the 3 double crochets that I made from the cluster. Some people do a chain 3. I just think it looks neater when it's slip stitched. And then I slip stitch into the chain space, chain up 3, and then work my cluster like I normally would. And now that we're to the bottom, you can see we already had our 6 because we attached that last cluster. So you're going to slip stitch into that one and then turn your work and do the same thing, doing a chain 1 and then slip stitching into the top of those 3 double crochet from that cluster, and then slip stitching into the chain space and chaining up 3 and working your 3 double crochet cluster like normal. Okay, so you can see now we're about halfway through our decreases, working to that opposite corner of our square. You're just going to continue doing the decreasing technique that I showed you previously, and then eventually you will get to the last cluster. Okay, so we're at our last cluster. Do the same thing, chain up 3, and then work those 3 double crochets into that chain space. Then you are going to want to slip stitch and attach to that cluster from the row below. All right, chain 1, turn, and then you're going to work into the top of those 3 double crochets that you just worked, and then place a slip stitch into the chain space. You're going to want to cut your yarn and then pull the loop through. And now you have attached corner to corner crochet squares. If you like this video, everybody, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more uploads. And I appreciate you watching the video. We'll see you in the next one.